As Rapture had finalised its build, its newfound society began to prosper almost immediately. Most of its residents were thrilled with their new home. The neon lights of the shops and advertisements beamed out into the dark depths of the ocean. Businesses were being invested in, science was able to be free of limitations, and the arts were able to entertain the masses throughout the city. However, little did the ones at the top know, but Rapture, from its creation, was just doomed to fail, as the working classes who had been hired for manual labour started to despise the ones at the top of Rapture. This would only escalate when the discovery of Adam was found, causing the population, both rich and poor, to become obsessed with it and its effects. But with this substance on the rise in terms of sales, something was needed to help production increase, and to also be safe for business owners. After this, a creature was made, one that stood taller than your average human, dressed in a full, deep diver's suit, but far bigger, and called out throughout the city in a deep, booming, whale-like voice. These creatures would be known as the Big Daddies, and would go on to be feared by residents of the forgotten and doomed Rapture. But what were the Big Daddies? Where did they come from? Who are they, and what are they? What was their role in Rapture, and what ultimately happened to them as Rapture began to fall? Well, in this video we tell of the story of the Big Daddies and how they evolved throughout the years. This is the lore behind Bioshock's deadly protectors, the Big Daddies. By the early 1950s, Andrew Ryan's dream was finally in full swing. He was able to begin the build of his city of his dreams, which he would go on to name Rapture. But 1952, Rapture was officially open, and its citizens start to pour in, embracing the new world, away from all the rules of American governments or Soviet rule. Dr. Sushong was one of Andrew Ryan's prized members of society, working within the labs, coming up with revolutionary technology that could help advance their society going forward, and make sure they were always ahead of the curve. Both Sushong and Dr. Tenenbaum were the ones to first discover the new incredible substance called Adam, which generated incredible healing powers, and when mixed with another substance would help genetically modify humans, allowing them to have abilities never seen before in human history. It didn't take long before Adam became a staple for Rapture, as everyone wanted some. It became an obsession for the residents. Business-minded individuals realized this was a market to get into. Demand was at an all-time high, and this is where the money was. Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine knew this and immediately started setting up their own businesses, trying to deal with the new Adam market. With this demand on the rise, Sushong proposed a new idea to Ryan. Here he realized that the people of Rapture would literally kill one another to get this substance. Spliced up individuals who had used Adam to modify themselves now lay dead throughout some of the areas of the city, meaning their bodies still carried genetically modified tissue that was now useless to them. Sushong pitched the idea of recycling the bodies of the splicers, collecting their raw genetic material to make sure the Adam was still circulating the city and none was going to waste. But they needed something or someone to do this role. It was here where Sushong decided to work with Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, who had created the Little Sisters, a creature that was essentially the original host of the Adam, a sea slug within a young human's body, more specifically a young girl's body. The idea behind the Little Sisters was that they were the only way to host the sea slugs and produce more Adam. Without this host, Adam production wouldn't nearly be as high as it was. Sushong saw these Little Sisters within the Adam laboratories and decided they were the perfect candidate to use for his recycling project. Ryan agreed to this but saw a problem. These modified girls were too weak to defend themselves. They would be a prime target for any splicer looking for Adam, and without any protection, they would be killed easily. It was here where Sushong came up with the idea of a protector that would guard the Little Sisters as they went about their work collecting Adam from dead splicers. Originally, Sushong had made these protectors as a creature that would help maintain Rapture, would dive down to ocean depths in their huge armor, and would make vital repairs to tunnels or outer walls. However, because of their size and armor, Sushong realized they could have a much bigger role in the running of Rapture. However, Ryan was told that becoming a protector was a one-way street, as the only way they were pieced together was not appealing, and trying to find candidates to apply for this would not be easy. You see, the protectors were indeed humans, however heavily modified ones at that. To start with, the candidate would have had to been heavily genetically modified with Adam. They were then sealed and grafted grafted into their special diving suits, merging their skin and organs to the armor. Their voice would also have to be modified by ripping out their voice box and installing a new one, and they would also have a pheromone applied to them to attract the little sisters to them. Knowing it would be hard to attract candidates to this project, Ryan still saw this as the only option going forward and said it would not be a problem. Whilst it is still relatively unknown who were the actual candidates for the Protector project, it is believed that a lot of them were in fact exiled criminals, criminally insane, and political dissidents who were imprisoned within Persephone. This would allow Ryan to get candidates with ease, and they would have no choice in the matter, and after their modifications, they would not remember who they were before it. It was an easy decision for Ryan. Augustus Sinclair, who owned the plasmid research company Sinclair Solutions, as well as one of the prisoners who was acting as a psychiatrist, Sophia Lang, helped with this project and would send over chosen test subjects from the prison to both Fontaine Futuristics and Ryan Industries. With these candidates, it was finally time to start the Protector project and create what was known as the Alpha series. Down in the labs of Fontaine Futuristics, a Dr. Gilbert Alexander started working on experiments related to the Protector project. Using the subjects from the prison, Alexander was able to create the first prototypes known as the Alpha series, and using pheromones was able to bond the little sister to these large, intimidating engineered humans. Here he came up with a new name for them. He saw the bond they had with the little sisters and decided to name them Big Daddies, and with this in mind decided to make them exactly that. He would change the way they behaved, make them mimic through mental and physical ways their actions of a loving father, making sure they attack anything and anyone that could harm their daughter. The goal of this experiment was to successfully create the pair bond. Due to this bond, the Big Daddies would follow their little sisters everywhere they went, would not leave their side at all, or if they did, would immediately chase them down to make sure they were safe, fighting off anyone in their way, only caring for what they thought was their daughter. Eventually his experiments were successful and he was able to successfully pair bond a Big Daddy to a little sister. This Big Daddy was then later called Subject Delta, the first Protector to be made successful, allowing this project to venture forward. Subject Delta, however, was a tragic tale. Unlike all of the other candidates who were from the prisons, Subject Delta was in fact just a regular man known as Johnny Topside, who had unfortunately discovered and entered the city by accident. If he hadn't, he would not have been a part of these horrific experiments that turned him into this creature. But because fate works in mysterious ways, he was now the first Big Daddy to be made successfully and turned into a loyal protector for his little sister. But there was a problem. Whilst the Alpha series were actually linking closely to the little sisters, the problem was they would only link to one and only one, meaning they couldn't really care for any others, only the one they had formed a bond with. This did not help the project at all, as they needed the Big Daddies to switch between little sisters. The biggest problem with the Alpha series was if they lost their little sister along the way, or if it was killed by a splicer, the Protector would be useless and would just stand there hoping for their daughter to come back, getting suicidally angry, as well as going on endless journeys in the hope to one day find them again. The doctors tried to reprogram the Alphas who had lost their little sisters, but that didn't help, as it only turned them into combatants who would just kill anyone in their way. Eventually it was evident that the Alpha series was not working and was deemed a failure. All of the remaining Alpha models were then deactivated and were kept in holding at Fontaine Futuristics, Minerva's Den, and Persephone. However, during this time Rapture was having a big problem. Frank Fontaine was now removed from the picture, Ryan ruled the city, and the working classes, now run by a mysterious Irishman known as Atlas, had had enough. They wanted to hit back and show that they weren't going to take Ryan's rule any longer. The working class started splicing up, modifying their bodies so they could be deadly in combat. But on the other side, those loyal to Ryan were also doing the same. Eventually things came to a head on the eve of 1959. Here revolutionaries bombed the Kashmir restaurant during a masquerade ball, causing panic and starting the civil war within Rapture. Banks crashed, Adam production suddenly became low, causing even more panic as people were desperate for Adam for them to live, so heavily spliced up that living without it would be worse than death. Because of all of this panic, it became clear that Adam production needed to become priority and the Little Sisters needed to be put out in full force, recycling all of the bodies from the Civil War, helping these Adam companies to keep up their demand. It was here where Ryan and Sushong realized they needed functioning protectors more than ever. They needed to get back to the laboratories to work on their next subject. Months went past where the bonding process was just failed attempt after failed attempt. The Big Daddies during this time were just ignoring the girls with no real care to defend them or guard them during their duties. This was not helped by Jeremiah Fink, who the year before used the trans-dimensional rift to jump into Rapture to steal their technology for Columbia. Sushong and Fink worked closely together trying to work on their projects, which was both related to the Protector projects. Fink with his Songbird and Sushong with the Big Daddies. During this, however, Fink's Songbird successfully bonded with its test subject and almost immediately closed the deal with Sushong. Sushong was desperate to steal Fink's successful bonding process, but it was no good. The link to Columbia was gone, and any chance of finding that successful bonding DNA was gone as well. Desperate to find a solution to the problem, Sushong didn't realize that the answer he needed was walking straight towards him, and was in fact the test subject that Fink had successfully bonded the Songbird to in the first place. That was Elizabeth. While Sushong carried on with his experiments trying desperately to work out the bonding process and get it working successfully, Elizabeth found herself trapped in a small area with two little sisters, Letta and Masha Lutz, as well as an injured Big Daddy. Here, Elizabeth tried everything she could to find a solution to the Big Daddy and heal him back to full health. She realized that it needed Adam to do this. Without a second thought, the two little sisters injected the Big Daddy with special Adam from themselves, hoping that would heal him. But in their amazement, not only did it bring the Big Daddy back to full strength, but it also made it completely loyal to the girls. They had finally found the successful bonding process. Rushing back to alert Dr. Sushong, the little sisters' cries fell on deaf ears. Sushong, irritated by the whole process, was unaware of the change in the Big Daddy's mannerisms and struck the girls who kept trying to talk to him. Immediately, the Big Daddy jumped to their defense and killed Sushong then and there. Luckily, well, sort of. Sushong was recording this at the time on the recording labelled Lot 255. This allowed others to realise that there was finally a solution to the Protector project. Immediately with this breakthrough, Big Daddy started to become bonded to little sisters, with pheromones being added to them to allow the girls to be drawn to them and not to be as terrified as they once were. Big Daddies were sent to the Proving Grounds, which was once the Memorial Museum at Point Prometheus, and were sent to train to make sure they were capable of defending their little sister from attackers. Many different variants were made from this Protector project now that the alphas had been removed from the production line. These consisted of the Bouncer, a large bulky Big Daddy that had a very unique and recognisable diving suit covered in a thick metal carapace, as well as a giant helmet guarding its face. Originally used within Rapture as the maintenance workers who would drill deep sea rocks and minerals, the Bouncers are armed with a huge drill on their right arm. This Big Daddy would be deadly in melee combat, ripping apart all of those who meant harm to their little sister. Most walk around with gold-plated armour, however some equipped a red striped paint to show they were the more deadly in the rest. The Rosie, a much more traditional looking deep sea diver who was originally used as the maintenance worker who would rivet panels and windows on the outside of the city. Not wielding a giant drill, Rosie was able to equip much more powerful rivet gun which they would use to fire on their enemies, impaling them to surfaces and taking them out from long range, mid range and close quarters. Once again, like the Bouncers, they don golden armour most of the time. However, those with more experience don a red stripe to show they are elites. The Rumbler, a Big Daddy that got brought into the production later on within the timeline, but one that is far deadlier than the previous two. The Rumbler is said to be an upgraded version of the Bouncer mixed with the Rosie range. This Big Daddy would be fitted with an RPG on its shoulder that would shoot non-guided rockets. A much more agile Big Daddy, but the Rumbler does not have as powerful armour than the others, but can be fast in combat, doing anything it can to defeat its foe. The Lancer. Like the Rumbler, a later addition to the Big Daddy army. Once again, an updated version of the Rosie, this Big Daddy would look like an ordinary human within a diving suit. It's tall and slender and far more decorated than any other Big Daddies. Holding an ion laser, they would be extremely deadly in battle. But luckily for the residents of Rapture, these Big Daddies would be kept inside Minerva's den with the Alpha series. Now with the production of Big Daddies being within full swing, it was finally time for the Recycling Adam project to go ahead. ahead. It was time to unleash the Big Daddies into the Rapture Society. The people of Rapture were used to seeing the Big Daddies, however most of the time this was from a distance, as they would be outside of the city or within closed off areas doing maintenance and not interfering with everyday things going on within the prospering streets. However, now the Protector Project was underway, more and more Big Daddies and Little Sisters were being sent out into the streets of Rapture, which did not go down well with the residents at all. A lot of the citizens went on to complain that the Big Daddies were incredibly intimidating and extremely aggressive to anyone who got in their way. Fear ran through the streets because of these creatures, with accidents happening because of the Big Daddy's extreme aggression. Ryan knew of this fear and utilised it to work in his favour. Here he would announce over the radio when a Big Daddy and Little Sister were on their way to scare splicers and citizens away from the area. However, he did try and make it so that people weren't as scared of these intimidating beings, and labelled them multiple times as knights in shining armour, who were only there to help Rapture be rid of all of the parasites who ran the streets. However, this still didn't work, and they were still seen as terrifying when roaming the streets. But as the violence within Rapture started to get worse, Ryan made sure more and more Big Daddies and Little Sisters roamed the streets, gathering all the Adam they could muster. Because of the overwhelming numbers of splicers, sometimes elite bouncers and Rosies were sent to protect the Little Sisters, as their combat skills were far superior to the average ones. On top of this, Ryan also started working on the Lancer to make sure that the Little Sisters were fully protected by the best. However, the Lancer project was never able to finalise, and the Lancers were kept within Minerva's den, along with the previously failed Alpha series. The year was now 1960. Andrew Ryan had now been killed by his biological son known as Jack, who had been mind controlled by Atlas, better known as Frank Fontaine. Splicers were still littering the streets and getting more and more aggressive on their journeys. Because of this, Big Daddies were falling in their numbers, killed by either Splicers, Atlas rebels, or Jack himself. This didn't completely wipe them out forever, however, and the gathering process still continued for years on end. And years after Ryan's death, Sophia Lamb, the once prisoner disguised as a psychologist, had taken control for herself. The Adam gathering continued, however. Some of the Little Sisters were now becoming too old to do their tasks, however. Because of this, Lamb decided to turn the older sisters into something new, something based off of the Big Daddy project. Here they would be turned into Big Sisters, heavily armoured in deep sea diving gear with metal plating protecting them from gunfire, along with a giant needle which would be used to continue to gather Adam. These Big Sisters were once again created by the mastermind behind the Big Daddies, Dr. Alexander, who wanted to help Sophia Lamb create a new fear for the many splicers that ruled the city. Lamb needed new Little Sisters, however, so here she utilised the Big Sisters and sent them to the surface to capture any little girls they could find. They would then plant the sea slug in them and continue the gathering process with the Little Sisters and now the Big Sisters. After Ryan had died, Dr. Tenenbaum decided to leave Rapture for a time. However, in 1968 decided it was time to return to Rapture to try and fix the mess that had been left there. Here her plan was to free the new Little Sisters, as well as finding a cure for Adam. With this, the first Big Daddy to be a successful candidate had gained awareness and been revived by Eleanor Lamb, Sophia Lamb's actual daughter, utilising the incredible computer known as the Thinker. Delta immediately started looking for his daughter once he awoke, the one he had lost all those years ago, that girl being Eleanor. With this, Subject Delta and the other reactivated Alpha series Subject Sigma regained part of their humanity and free will and tried everything they could to come to terms with what was going on and try and end the rule of Sophia Lamb. But Lamb wasn't going to take this and activated the broken Alpha series along the way to try and stop Delta and Sigma from destroying her rule. While Sophia Lamb's fate is really down to Delta's choices within that timeline, it is clear that Rapture will always have a cycle, and the Big Daddies, Big Sisters, and the Little Sisters are all part of it. Lamb could die. Lamb could be saved. There are too many variables to know how it truly ends. But one thing is for sure, the Big Daddies were one of Rapture's most memorable creations. And when anyone thinks of Rapture, one of the first things you'll come to think of is the Big Daddies and the Little Sisters. There is always a lighthouse. There's always a man. There's always a city. And most likely throughout all of the multiverses that exist, there is always a protector who is bound to someone. And that is the lore behind Bioshock's most iconic creature, the Big Daddy. I hope you enjoyed this video and let me know what other Bioshock related things you'd like to see going forward. If you did enjoy it, then why not give it a like, leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and why not check out my other lore videos in the playlist linked in the description. I'll leave my Twitter, Twitch, Clip channel and Discord links below if you want to support me on there, and if you really enjoy this type of content, then why not consider supporting me on Patreon or YouTube for early access to my new videos as well as ad-free ones. And speaking of, I'd like to thank my patrons real quick. Big thanks to our big fish Duquesne23, Rhino Head, Ryan Garnham and Sacrum, our sharks the AVP Man and Connor, and our huge megalodons Sinus, JJD896, Jacob Garcia and Wow Such Gaming. Also big thanks to our YouTube channel member, our Wise One Jambu, as well as all my subscribers over on Twitch. All your support means the world to me and allows me to continue making these types of videos for you guys. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching again, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.